You may be seated, please. Oh, sorry. Please, kindly take the microphone. I beg your pardon. Thank you. Be seated. Members of the Senate, it is my pleasure to bring up my the chairman of the chairman, other than Mr. Chairman, sir. The Vice Chancellor of the University, Professor Aliyu Usman El-Nafaty, the Usman,
Uh, here today for the purpose of another edition of the 8th professorial inauguration. This time, again, we are making history because Professor Bulus Wayar from the Department of English in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences of this university will be the first in that department. Legitimate position of professors in the academia, in the university. And so we're going to have
to witness and listen to a person from the English university. for this 8th Inaugural lecture. Last week, these inaugural lectures, even though the also studying linguistically, we're also thank you. Introduce to Alirukum, Director of Part-Time Program, Federal University of Kashmir. Federal University Kashmir is in our midst. I'm also delighted to see Professor Kalai, who is also in our midst. You are welcome. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Aliyu Usman El-Nafaty has started. He shows that this of harvest. A little bit 1 week old as a professor of history, who I need to remind him that he should begin to prepare an inaugural lecture. We're likely to skip and give you the opportunity. It is my pleasure to invite the university orator, Professor Isaac Ejuba, to come and give us a citation of the inaugural lecture.
The Vice Chancellor of the State University, our amiable Professor Aliyu Usman El-Nafaty, Officer of the Federal Republic, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Administration, Professor Kanladi Muhammad Umar, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academy, Professor Sani Yauta, the Registrar, Dr. Abakar Aliyu Usman, the University Librarian, Dr. Henry Maynard, the University Bossa, Mr. Jefania Shehu, the Chairman, University Ceremonies Committee, who doubles as the Dean School of Postgraduate Studies of this university, Professor Muhammad Burama, distinguished professors and members of the University Senate, deans and directors, other academic, administrative, and technical staff of the university, our dear postgraduate and undergraduate students, visiting professors, ladies and gentlemen. I have the singular honor and privilege on behalf of the Chief Academic Officer of this university, the Vice Chancellor, to render the citation of a distinguished professor, Bulus Wire, on the occasion of his inauguration as a professor of English of this university. Born on the 10th of November 1966 in the famous Chibok town of Borno State, Bulus Wire had his primary education in the local government of Borno State from 1974 to 1980. He proceeded to the government secondary school Bama between 1980 and 1985. He ventured into a small-scale business which lasted for 4 years. But destiny veered his mission as he enrolled for the Bachelor of Arts degree in English at the University of Maiduguri and graduated in 1994. After the mandatory NYSC in Kwara State, Wire returned home to pick up a job at the Kashim Ibrahim College of Education in Maiduguri, where he was between 1995 to 2004. Professor Bulus Wire returned to his alma mater in 1998 and graduated with his Master of Arts in the year 2000. He delved into a specialization in stylistics. After working assiduously at the college, his employers promoted him severally as he rose to the rank of chief lecturer. As an erudite scholar of his time, he had the opportunity to work on part-time basis at the Rama Polytechnic Maiduguri and ATBU respectively. These experiences broadened his scholarship horizon. He joined the service of Gombe State University on 4th October 2005 as a lecturer too. In assumption of duty, Professor Bulus Wire continued his search for knowledge, and he eventually enrolled into the PhD program at the University of Kelaniya in Sri Lanka, where he earned a philosophy degree in general analysis. Precipitated by the linguistic interrelatedness, Professor Bulus Wire has published over 50 articles on social linguistics and general analysis, and became a professor in the two broad linguistic disciplines. Professor Bulus held several positions in this university, which include Pioneer Examination Officer, English Department, 2005 to 2011, Pioneer Assistant Faculty Examination Officer, 2005 to 2009, Pioneer FAST Seminar Coordinator, Pioneer Postgraduate Coordinator, English Department, 2018 to 2020, Member Faculty Timetable Committee, 2010 to 2011, Member Faculty Business Committee 2018 to 2020. Member Library Committee Department of English 2018 to 2020. Head of Department of English 2020 to January 2024. Member Documentation Subcommittee 2023 Combined Convocation. Professor Bulus Wire played a pivotal role which led to the success of the last convocation in this university. Professor Wire is a member of several professional bodies. Few among them include the American Council of Learned Society, Linguistic Association of Nigeria, and Pragmatic Association of Nigeria. As a committed and result-driven academic, INEC headquarters in Abuja shortlisted him for the role of returning officer in Funakai local government area, where Professor Bulus Wire performed meritoriously, which prompted the state INEC commissioner to recommend him for an award. When he was the head of English department, he became the chief editor of Savannah Journal of Languages, Literary and Communication Studies. In Africa, Professor Wire is an editor to one journal. In Asia, he is also an editor to another journal. His philosophy is premised on his belief a noble teacher is a prisoner of his mission. And to Professor Bulus, the scope of the classroom is not only the four corners of a building, but also include other domains. He is happily married with 4 children. May I, on behalf of the Vice Chancellor, invite our inaugural lecturer to kindly present his lecture. Thank you for listening.
The Vice Chancellor, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Administration, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics, the Bursar, the Registrar, the University Librarian, the Provost, College of Medical Sciences, the Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, the Dean, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and other deans, directors of various directorates, distinguished members of the University Senate, the head of the Department of English and other heads of other departments, our principal officers of the university, management and staff of sister universities, your lordship, spiritual and temporal, your royal majesties and highnesses, distinguished academics, professional colleagues, representatives of professional associations and friends, dear friends, students past and present, members of the press, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Today marks a history in my life. It's a day I have been longing to see. When I was informed that I was going to perform this function, so many things came to my mind. I knew I was going to speak to an audience, multiple audience, with different specialization and interests and perceptions of life. So the challenge of choosing a topic was fraught with lots of agitations. But the lion that must catch a prey must be prepared to have scars on the face. It is on that ground that I've picked up the challenge and prepared my lecture to deliver to you this evening. When my friends came across the topic, so many things came to their mind. Are you out of your mind? What do you know about food that you want to speak about it? You cannot speak the language. How did you get it from? I laughed and I said, researchers have no bound. Your interest is developed by your quest to change the narratives that the society faces. Something came to my mind that I want to share with us. I said, we must know ourselves. Over the years, I discovered that many people didn't know themselves. Where you come from, you don't know. So I said, let me write down something. The topic you have before us today is a result of so many years of research. 2016, 2017, 2018, 2023. I ventured into studies. What happens to language? Sociolinguistics is a study of the relationship between man and language. I wanted to establish what happens to man and language. I've had so many publications. I've conducted research in the local government area And I wanted to know what happens to Babubra as a language. And I made some predictions. And I said in the next 150 years, something will happen, except if something else happens. I went to Damboa, and I looked at a particular ethnic group, Margi Putai, and I looked at how they use their language. And I discovered a large degree of shift to Kanuri. And I conducted research on that. And I discovered that something was about to happen to them. My intention was actually to sensitize them on the dangers ahead. Then coming to my topic, here is a very large ethnic group in Africa. My father has been a friend of Fulani people when I was coming up as a child. He has so many friends. They loved him, and he loved them in return. And ever since, I've been trying my possible best to learn how to speak Fulfulde. But again, during the course of my career, I had to grapple with a lot of languages. When my father migrated from Kanigoro, from Kukawa to Chibok, my father needed to pick a language of the environment. He had to return Kanuri and pick Kibagu. When I was born, again, I needed to speak the language of my father. When my parents migrated 2 years after my birth to Biu, I was found in a society that doesn't speak the language I do. Again, I was fraught with the challenge of choosing a language. My father was so rigid in his Kanuri and Quebec languages. When he found himself in Biu, as an old man at that time, there was no need to learn any other language according to him. But for me as a young man, I needed to retain Kanuri, Kibaku, learn how to speak Babubra, learn how to speak Hausa, the dominant language of the environment, and also speak English when at school. These challenges prompted me to go into knowing what happens to a man and the language. The story that happened when I enrolled into secondary school was so astonishing. I was enrolled at the famous Government Science Secondary School, Bama. It was a cosmopolitan school with so many students from different walks of life, different backgrounds. We had students from America, from United Kingdom, from Canada, and from Asia. Because at that time, the Borno State government needed to bring teachers from different parts of the world in order to augment the shortfall of teachers we had in the state. So in my class, we had so many students from different countries. Therefore, speaking English became apparent for me. Unfortunately for me, I was destined to study sciences. My mathematics teacher, Mr. Agrawal from India. My chemistry teacher, Mr. Pradesh from India. My integrated science, Mr. Vardish from India. When they entered to teach, I could hardly understand what they were saying. So I had failed all the courses they taught. Meanwhile, my English teacher was Mr. John Cole from the United Kingdom. I so much loved him, and he loved me in return. It was John Cole who promised me that if I study hard like he did, I would be an English teacher one day. I told my mother. My mother said, "Is it possible?" I said, "I don't know." Ever since I developed interest to study English. First year, I applied to study English. I was not offered the admission. My brother wanted me to study law. I said, no, I'd rather go for journalism, mass communication. Before I could take the decision, admission was over. It was after the third year that I reapplied. And lucky enough for me, I was offered the admission. I began to study English. The more I studied English, the more I encountered some challenges. I was thinking I would be somebody who could speak English fluently. And now let me pass this to you, please, that for the fact that you have a degree in English doesn't make you a good English speaker. People who study English are conscious of the rules and the regulations, but could barely speak good English. People who speak good English are people who have studied other courses, maybe mathematics or other sciences. So don't feel that you're going to hear or listen to some kinds of expressions that you never heard. Some people told me outside that, oh, we need to go to a dictionary in order to understand what you're going to say. But let me put this to you, that during the course of my lesson, when I was preparing this lesson, I did all I could to streamline the content of my note so as to make it so simple for everyone to comprehend. Now my motivation. What motivated me into this topic? I understand that there are about 7,000 languages in the world. 7,000 languages. 7 billion people in the world. But I discovered that out of these 7,000 languages, 1,641 are at the verge of extinction. By implication, in a short while, these languages will no longer be spoken. Number two, I was alarmed by the size of Fulbe, the Fulani. I considered them as a very large ethnic group in Africa. But during the course of my instruction and research, I have discovered that very few of them are eager to speak the language. So I developed interest in conducting research on this group of people. Their behavior towards the language, their encounter towards the language, their responses towards the language. Now my introduction. Undetermined, sir, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As a teacher of English, I'm always baffled each time I ask my students, what is English? Or what is language? Never in my life have I ever received answers, correct answers to the questions I asked about what is language. Each time I ask this question, what my students will tell me is that language is a means of communication. And I say, if you say language is a means of communication, you are telling us the function of a language. That is the function of a language. What then is a language? To define what a language is, you require the whole night, which we won't have the time to do that. But as a linguist, I look at language as a complex web of semiotics that is human specific. Complex web of semiotics that is human specific. What do I mean by human specific? Scientists have discovered that it's not only humans that can speak language. The apes, the honeybees can also speak language. But for us, as sociolinguists, we debunk that theory. We say that language is typical of human. From the beginning of creation, man has been with a language. Man is part and parcel of a language. There's no society without a language, and there's no language without a society. The two go hand in hand. No one is without a language. And all languages are expressive. All languages are equal. They have the same status. Nevertheless, the difference you may find in languages lie with the fact that some languages are spoken by a larger group of people. Some languages offer more economic viability and social mobility than others. Other than this, all languages are expressive. All languages are arbitrary. All languages are what? Are cultural. All languages are sociocultural. All languages are contextual. Therefore, this evening, permit me to take you through what happens to language. From the beginning of creation, I repeat, man has never been a static human being. Among all the animals that God has created, man has been the unstable of all the animals. Man moves, man explores, man does not stay in one place. As he moves, he carries along his language because his language defines him. He needs language to go and explore the new environment he finds himself. And because language is not static, language comes into contact with other languages. Remember I said there are about 7,000 languages. So when you move from point A to point B, you are coming into contact with other languages. And the result of encounter with other languages lead to what we call multilingualism. Multilingualism, I want to define it as the ability to understand the social culture of people. It's not just the ability to speak two or more languages. No. I want to redefine multilingualism to refer to the ability of someone to understand the social culture of the people. Because language is cultural. Language is social. You cannot understand a language if you do not understand the culture of the people who speak the language. Therefore, if you move from one place to the other, as you face other languages, you have some challenges to face. You have to make a choice. Which of the languages would you use? Because each context you find yourself determines which language you're going to pick. So the challenge of language choice comes along with what? Comes along with the challenge of movement. And so men cannot stay in one place. Therefore, they will have to learn several languages to suit their purposes. Migration, war, diseases, famine, so many reasons make men to move. In some cases, men travel from one point to the other because they want to explore. They want to see what happens in other part of the world. During this movement, of course, like I said earlier, so many things will happen. You have to imbibe the culture of other people because culture and language are intertwined. You cannot separate the two. So, what is the problem now? The problem is that Fulfulde, the language of the Fulbe or the Fulani people, is at the verge of extinction. What do I mean by this? The language is vulnerable. Somebody might want to know, how does a language die? For me, as a professor of sociolinguistics, language does not die, but language can be overpowered, over-enveloped by more viable languages or more dominant languages. So if a language is subdued, is repressed by more dominant language, that language is referred to as a dead language. Now the question is, do we have languages that are dead? Yes. We have about 375 languages that are no more spoken. The speakers of those languages either died completely or they have shifted to languages that they feel will give them what they want in life. You see, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me share with us that language use is like a business. No one will want to invest into a venture, into a business that will not yield a profit. If you are born in Kaltungo, for example, your language is Tangale, and you find yourself in Abuja, for example, you will have to make a choice. The community you live, do they understand Tangale? The school your children attend, do they speak Tangale? The job you're going to pick, will your boss understand Tangale? Now, these are the questions you ask yourself. So, when you have people who are trying to shift from their language, they are making alternative choices. They are making lots of concentrations. So, Fulfulde, the language of the Fulani people, is at the verge of extinction. Why? The reason is that parents do not transmit the language to their young ones. The parents can speak the language, but they minimize the rate at which they use the language. In some cases, the language has been reduced to only the family domain. And the question is that, how many hours do parents spend with the children at home? We all know what the modern society poses for us. We spend much of our time outside the home. When we return to the home, we have limited time to spend with the children. Therefore, the children are left there to choose which language to use. As they play with their peer groups in the society, they come into contact with languages that can provide them with socialization. So, what happened? What happened is that the Fulbe are shifting. They are shifting from where? They are shifting from Fulfulde. Where are they going to? They are going to languages. Languages that are more powerful. Languages that give them political attainment, social mobility. Language that will give them opportunity, job opportunities. So what is language shift? Language shift is just a simple act. When you change position A to B, you have shifted. So when speakers of a particular language begin to shift, begin to change, begin to develop negative attitude towards their heritage language, to another language, we refer to it as language shift. Language shift can also be defined as the inability of someone to retain the mother tongue. What then is a mother tongue? Mother tongue is a language that a child picks from the parents. Why do we refer to it as the mother tongue? At the point of birth, the first person that speaks to the child is, of course, the mother. And that's why the mother takes the ownership of language. So the mothers are the custodian of the language. Fathers do not have language. They have little time to spend with the children, therefore it is the mother who teaches the child the language. Where is the father then? What does the father stand to gain? The father retains the land in which the language is spoken. And that's why the father is being referred to as well as the fatherland. The mother and the child have a language at their disposal, but they live in a land that the father is in charge. So at the end of the day, the two must come. When the husband and the wife come together, as they communicate in the family, they are supposed to communicate in the heritage language where the child or the children will understand. But in most cases, they only speak their heritage language when they have secrets that they want to pass or they want to share. Otherwise, like I said earlier, they go into languages of the environment. Language loss. How can a language get lost? Language can be lost. If you shift from a language and you never return back to the language, then that language will remain without a speaker. So language loss is the extreme end of language shift. When your language is lost, the only thing that can revive the language is when the speakers of the language have decisively taken steps to revitalize their language by going back to the drawing board, by involving the young ones into speaking the language and understanding their culture and their tradition. Because language embodies culture and tradition. Consequences of language loss. Do we have a price to pay if we fail to speak our heritage languages? Yes, there are prices we have to pay. I said that your heritage language is the weapon you have to defend yourself wherever you go. Language is a mark of identity. If you claim to be a a Pulo, one of the things that will distinguish you from other people that are not Fulbe is when you're able to speak with the native accents. You have to speak with the native accent. If for any reason you can't speak your language, then you must also know your history. Because language embodies your history. Before we have documents, paper like this, human beings were using what? Oral source to document, to trace our history, to tell our history. Therefore, when you lose your history, you lose your background. If you lose your background, you lose your boundary. If you lose your boundary, you lose your identity. If you lose your identity, you lose your freedom. Because you become vulnerable to anybody. Anybody can come and attack you. Anybody can claim the ownership of the land you belong. Therefore, it's very important we know that if we shift from our heritage language to any language, whether it's English, Spanish, or Mandarin, or anything, there's a price we have to pay. In African society, disputes are settled orally by tracing the background of the people that are involved in land disputes. If the dispute is land related, the history of settlers are traced through oral sources. But if you cannot remember your history, if you cannot speak your heritage language, you wouldn't know where you come from. You don't know where your forefathers came from. And that will enable any invader to take over your land. Today we have hostilities in different communities in Africa because of the fact that many people have become modernized. Globalization has changed everything about us. Everybody wants to be identified with the city, what the city has to offer for us. We have forgotten where we come from. And that's why it is easy for someone who is stronger than you to come and take over your land. And if you go to a court of land, what the judge will do is to ask you, how dare you say this is your land? Prove to us that this land is yours. You become perplexed and confused if you do not have any history to tell. When a community loses its one heritage language, your culture is deprived. Your culture is embedded in the language you use. All of us here, the entire world, we are all product of a particular culture. So people may feel that their culture is more popular than others. My concern here is to say that everyone who speaks a language is speaking the language within a realm of a particular culture or social culture. No one speaks a language, no one behaves, no one acts outside a realm of a particular culture. If you lose your heritage language, you will be like a man without what? A man without a name that can be traced. Culture, actually, culture, people say is a way of life. Everything you do is embodied in your culture. The way you eat, the way you dress, the way you talk, the way you even worship. Even worship, Islam and Christianity, this religion erupted out of a particular culture. The culture of the Arabian, the culture of the Jew. So, culture is so important to us. Of course, we can go into sciences, but I can assure you that whichever field you belong to, you need to know the culture you belong. Because your history will help you to expand your research, to affect the cause of humanity. Language attrition. Someone was asking me, what is the meaning of attrition? Is it an English word? I said, no, it's give up. Attrition is just a simple word. It means reduction. When people shift from their language, Mr. A shifts from his heritage language to English. His linguistic repertoire, everybody possesses linguistic repertoire. The lexicons, the words that you know in that language is your word, is your pride. It is that which you use to communicate with other people. If you shift from one point to another point, you are losing the linguistic repertoire that you have at your disposal. And time will come that you'll have very few vocabularies to communicate in the language. This final stage leads to what we refer to as language death. When you lost all your linguistic repertoire to other languages, then the language that you have shifted away from becomes a dead language if nobody also speaks the language. Coming to my topic proper, location of the Fulful Day. Fulful Day is a language spoken by the Fulbe. It's interesting to note that we have English as a global language. No dispute about this. But this evening I want to share with us some few things. That here is a language that is so large that we do not know. Fulful Day is spoken in 25 countries in Africa. I started like this, from Benin Republic up to Tanzania, serially, alphabetically. You have 25 countries in which Fulful Day is spoken. The 10 largest languages we have in the world, English is number one. 1.42 billion speakers of English. Mandarin, English, the language spoken by the Chinese, 1.38 billion people. Number 3 is Hindi, the language spoken by the Indians. 662 million people are using the language. Spanish, 559. French, 309. Arabic, 274. Bengali, 272. Portuguese, 263. Russian, 245. Urdu, 231. Out of all these languages, apart from English, in fact, even English is spoken as a first language in only 5 countries of the world: United States, Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Every other place where English is spoken as a second language. What then is a second language? A second language is a language that performs more functions than even indigenous languages. In Nigeria, English is our second language. It means we have our mother tongues. We have our L1, our first languages that we have acquired, and then we have English again coming. So a second language is a language that comes after your first language, which may be your mother tongue, or can be another language that you come across other than your parents' language. Now, but we hear is Fulful Day. Mandarin, for example, the language spoken by the Chinese, only 3 countries, China, China, Macau, and Taiwan. These are the countries that Mandarin is spoken. And about 663 million people are using this language. But Fulfulde is spoken in 25 countries as mother tongue, as first language, as second language. No other language in the world has reached this position. No other languages. Out of these 10 languages that I've mentioned, only one language in Africa. And that's why I say that they are boundless. Another thing, very important, ladies and gentlemen, this evening, is not that Fulfulde is not only spoken in Africa. That DNA test has revealed that there is a link between Fulbe and southeastern countries in Europe. We have the countries here: Albania, Andorra, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Greece, Belgium, Romania, Slovenia, Spain, Macedonia, and Yugoslavia. That there's a link between these countries and Fulani people. There's a link. So I have not ventured into finding out whether Fulfulde is spoken in those countries. But I want to tell somebody here that please, you can expand my research and help us reach out whether or not there are also Fulfulde speakers in these countries that I've mentioned. The tradition of the Fulani people. Historically, the Fulani or the Fulbe are pastoralists. Okay? They rear animals. But let me make this clear that in Africa, they are not the only ones who rear animals. The Maasai of Kenya rear animals. The Shua Arab of Chad and Cameroon rear animals. The Mangawa of northern Nigeria rear animals. We have tribes also in Morocco that also rear animals, but they are not Fulani people. So please let me make this point clear. But during the course of time, so many factors came into being. Because of mobilization, migration, globalization, change, climate change, and so many things, so many Fulani people have lost their heritage careers. Today we have professors among them. Some of them are even presidents of nations. Some of them have become settlers and are farmers. If you go to Mombasa in Kenya, some of them are traders. In Morocco, in Tunisia, they trade in gold. In Marwa, in Garwa, in Cameroon, they trade in cattle. In Nigeria, some of them are even what? So many things. So we can't say that Fulani remain pastoralists. However, I discovered that millions of them have returned or combined pastoralism and farming and other traits. This has made some tremendous changes in their customs and culture and tradition in general, which I'll explain later. To the Fulani man, the cattle is not just an animal. The cattle is not just a symbol of economy. It's a symbol of social relatedness, social viability. If a Fulani man who is a pastoralist and does not have cattle, he sees himself as a failure. If you touch the cattle, you have touched his entire life. You have touched his culture, you have touched his tradition, you have touched his history. Therefore, the cattle is one of the reasons that led to why we are here. I will explain to you later. When they move in order to provide food for the cattle, they have sacrificed so many gifts because of the animal. What is that gift? Their heritage language. They have forfeited their culture because they needed to provide food for the animal. And that's why they move from Egypt down to Nile, Blue Nile, up to Sudan, River Baal Ghazal, Blue Nile, White Nile, River Congo, all those riverine areas. They move around these shores because they needed to provide greener pastures for the animals. These movements are not without what? Without cost. They are boundless. How are they boundless? They are everywhere. They don't need any passport, any last passe to pass from one frontier to another frontier because they are pastoralists. They do not pass through tarred roads. They move around with the animals. They are harmless to the communities they come across. They only retaliate if you want to tamper with their animals. Of course, it's normal with anybody. Anybody who touches your source of livelihood, you have the right to defend yourself. So, only nature prevents them from moving forward. Number one, they avoid dry zones, the desert, the Kalahari, the Namibian, and the Sahara. They avoid these areas because their animal will thirst and will die of hunger. So they avoid these areas. Before the introduction and improvement of veterinary medics, I discovered that they've also avoided going to riverine area where there are tsetse flies that can infect their animals. But thank God for the improvement in medics. Today, they can be found even around riverbanks, like I said. Look at my topic, demographically undetermined. Nobody determines the number of the Fulbe we have in Africa. So many reasons are provided. Number one, censuses of all the countries where the Fulbe come from do not provide adequate data with respect to the number of the Fulani people. Number two, not all country censuses include questions on identity when filling the form. Number three, the Fulani culture and tradition is fusy. Sometimes you can hardly distinguish between the Fulani community and other communities that they coexist because they share so many things in common. I said earlier that when they move from one point to another point, they pick so many things on the way, including the culture of the people. So if you go there to check the statistics of Fulani people, you get confused about who actually is Fulani. Number four, France, the father of all the Francophone countries, refused to give the Fulani people, the pastoralists especially, their exact number. They never wanted in any way, nor with precision, the number of Fulani pastoralists in all Francophone countries. And the reason is that they know that your strength lies in your number. So they avoid the possibility of the Fulani knowing their number. Another reason is that we have different dialects of Fulani across Africa. In Senegal, we have about 16 dialects. In Mali, you have about 9 dialects. In Nigeria, you have about 3 dialects. In Cameroon, more than 6 dialects. So linguists have this difficulty of ascertaining what is actually the difference between language and dialects. Let me define so that we know what I'm talking about. A dialect is like a tree. Within a tree, you have branches. The branches are linked to the stem. So the branches are the dialects of a language. A language, 2 dialects or 3 dialects is like the same language. Some part of the people migrate to another place because of contact. They will borrow terms from the language they encounter. So as time goes on, you discover that they do not look like the same language. You have some variations in phonology, in semantics, and in what have you. So we have this difficulty in knowing these discrepancies. We have so many communities, especially in northern Cameroon, around Gaundari, around Marwa. We also have this challenge in Mozambique, around Congo, and then Rwanda border. You have Fulani people that have settled there for decades. They are into mining gold. Some of them are into other businesses. So they have been diffused into the community where they found themselves. And so it's so difficult for sociolinguists to know who actually is Fulani and who is not Fulani. One other reason is that documentation of Fulani in Chad, Central African Republic, Sudan, is fraught with a lot of challenges because of the fact that, apart from the fact that they live in difficult terrains and they migrate faster than ever. Their movement is faster than any other Fulani ethnic groups in Africa. So enumerators, they find difficulties of ascertaining with precision the number of the Fulani in those countries that I've mentioned. Usman El-Nafaty and Islamic Jihad and the implication of linguistics. Many of us are students of history. We may have been told this when we were coming up as students. Usman El-Nafaty was an ardent Islamic scholar. Okay, he started his jihad in 1804. Okay, in Gobir, the present-day Kebbi State, I suppose. His mission was actually to see that proper Islamic practices are enforced in Hausa land. Because before he became a scholar, he discovered that Islam was being mixed with other traditions and culture in the north. So, he ventured into a movement that metamorphosed into a jihad. He succeeded in conquering so many communities. He moved as far as the Yoruba land, Kwara State, Nupe, northeastern Nigeria, north central, and other places. The jihad was successful. But something was fundamentally wrong. His concern was actually not political, although some people will dispute the fact that his mission was political. What he discovered was that he dethroned all the Hausa aristocrats who didn't know Islam and enthroned Fulani clerics whom he thought knew Islam better. And that's why some historians were saying it was politically related. That's what we I'm being on my paper. But what I want to say here is that when Usman El-Nafaty did that, he left behind his heritage language. He preached, he interpreted the Quran and the Hadith in Hausa language. So Hausa took advantage of that and worked stronger, and it became the largest language spoken in the world in Nigeria, second largest language spoken in Africa after Swahili. That was the same thing that the Normans did in England. The Normans invaded England in year 1066. When they got to England, within 14 years of their stay in England, they got civilized in English customs and tradition. And they picked up women from England and changed their names to English names, and they could speak English and not French. The same thing happened to Usman El-Nafaty. His followers, who are good Islamic clerics, dropped Fulful Day under the guise that they are minority. But with the influence Usman El-Nafaty had, that was the right opportunity for him to what? To impose Fulful Day. And that would have been a different story today. Hausa would have lost its status as the largest, or the second largest language in Africa. The work by Usman El-Nafaty has brought in something that we all know. It has brought about what we refer to as a language cluster, the diffusion of Fulful Day and Hausa Fulani. Hausa Fulani is a new identity that came up as a result of contact between the Hausa and the Fulani. And that has given us a new identity. Today, people are being referred to as Hausa Fulani, not because you cannot be two identities. That's the truth. For us as linguists, you are either Fulani or you are Hausa. But here we have an identity that is clustered. But the name Hausa Fulani is actually being referred to the Fulani renegades. What I mean by renegade is somebody who has forfeited his heritage for another heritage, but is feeling nostalgic, is feeling regrettable. He feels like, oh, I wish I'm still there. That's the term. Another thing is that the term is being used by some, northern aristocrats who feel that, no, it's time for us to change. If we do not appear in a larger group, we won't be able to make impact in the politics of northern Nigeria. So they come under the guise of Hausa Fulani. If somebody comes under the guise of Hausa Fulani, nobody can fight the person because the person is carrying a larger identity. But for people outside the north, for example, the minorities maybe like me, we might think that the Hausa Fulani is another way of domination, political and economic domination. The middle belters, like my friend, Professor Yediba, where are you? I hope you know that people are agitating that middle belt is not part of Nigeria. So they are one of the people that are agitating, that are making these assertions that House of Fulani is another group, neo-political or imperialist group that has come to what? To redominate what the Northerners are known for. But to us as sociolinguists, we don't see it from that angle. We look at it as a face that is depriving the Fulani of their real identity. Because when you talk about Hausa Fulani, in their meetings, they do not use Fruitful Day. That's what I discovered. They don't use Fruitful Day there. Let me say this to you, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Because of what Usman El-Nafaty did, all the palaces of the emirs of northern Nigeria, all of them have forfeited the use of Fruitful Day as an official language of the palaces. The emir of Ilorin, Sulu Gambari, I discovered that he uses Hausa language. He's so proud to say he's Fulani, but he cannot speak Fulani, Fruitful Day. The same thing, the emir of Ilorin, of Mina. Fulani people, they found themselves in a different community. They've been accepted by the people they rule. They have never relegated, they have never denied their identity as Fulani. But one thing that they have lost control of is the language. We have mentioned, we have explained here the intricacies, the challenges we face. We should know that our forefathers, our traditional rulers should know that it's not too late. They can still do something for us. Because of that, in Congo, Brazil, Congo, Kinshasa, I discovered that there are Fulani people that have stayed there for as long as 250 years, long before Congo became independent. But surprisingly, dominate one ethnic group and impose Fruitful Day on them. Kinshasa, Congo, Brazil, they are good speakers of Lingala. If you go to Ethiopia, they speak language of Ethiopian, Kituba, Kirawanda, Itabu. These are languages that Fulani are fluent speakers of. Very few people outside Africa can speak and want to speak Fruitful Day. And the reason is that the Fruitful Day people are multilingual. They are so smart, it doesn't take them long time to know the language of the community they come into contact. So they feel that if I can take your language, you don't worry yourself in taking my language. Before you relax to begin to pick one or two things in Fruitful Day, they have learned your language. So you'll be surprised from proceeding further to what? To learn Fruitful Day. Because of what we have discussed, I have identified time span and timeline of Fruitful Day. Number one, by the year 2150, there will be no Fruitful Day speakers. No Fruitful Day speakers. Who will be able to remember all sets of phrases, all sets of sentences, all proverbs, who will speak from the beginning to the end of the conversation without commixing or conswitching. They will not be able to produce Fruitful Day sentences correctly without any mixture of any form of language. However, hope is not lost. Like what happened in the war. After they discovered that the Margi people are not Kanuri, when they discovered that Kanuri people didn't love them the way they thought, they said, we can never blend with them. Let's go back to our heritage language. Today, they have formed a movement, something similar to Usman El-Nafaty did, a demilitarized movement that will revamp Margi people. The Fruitful Day speakers can do the same like what Margi people did in the war. How do you do that? You can do that by one. We said language is a mark of identity. Fruitful Day native speakers should understand this reality, that to work and preserve their heritage language is key in their survival as an ethnic group. For you to survive as an ethnic group, you need to preserve your ethnic and heritage language. Time will come that somebody will pick your son and ask, where are you from? And my father said, I am Fulani and we come from Gombe. Where is Gombe? I don't know. You may be in your grave, but the child will not forgive you. Number two, every language is a repository of history. What defines you as a man, your identity, is because of the history. No man is without history. No matter how poor you are, how lonely you are, you have a history. Therefore, native speakers of Fruitful Day, and of course every other person here seated listening to me, is supposed to understand this fact, that your cultural values are embedded in the language of your mothers, your mother tongue, your originality. That's where you're supposed to. I'm not saying that you shouldn't speak English or speak Spanish or Arabic. No. You can maintain these big languages or 10 languages we have mentioned, but you can maintain your heritage language in what? In one or two domains. It can be the language of the family when you return from work or from school. You can speak to the children. Let your children know who you are and where you come from through your language. Number three, knowledge, people say, is power. Therefore, heritage language contributes to human knowledge. We need language to survive. No nation survives. In fact, let me say this to you. That research has shown that no country in the world has developed using Andaman's language. Singapore tried. They couldn't. Malaysia tried. They couldn't. Sudan tried. They couldn't. Sri Lanka tried. They couldn't. You need your language to be able to develop because you use language to think. Somebody might think there's no relationship between thinking and language. A deaf and dumb cannot talk because he does not think. Because language is where? Language is in the mind. Which part of the mind? The left hemisphere of the human brain. It is the aspect of the human being that produces language. Coherent language, coherent speech is also, is found where? At the left hemisphere of the brain. Today, we record massive failure, especially during 100-level examinations, because we teach our students in the language they do not understand very well. Borno State government took some students to study medicine in Sudan. He said, keywords and phrases I explained in Arabic in Sudan. They returned to Nigeria with distinctions. They perform better than their compatriots and counterparts who study in English. If you go to Russia, for example, to study medicine, they will want you to take one or two courses in what? In Russian. They want to promote their culture. Many of us do not want to go to those countries. We want to go to America, we want to go to Canada, we want to go to places where English is spoken. People feel that prestige is attached to English, only English. I said no. Prestige is attached to every language of the world. Thank you for listening. Before I take my seat, let me say this. Today marks the history of my life. I'm so proud to be here. I'm so sorry I spoke fast. I'm conscious of the time. I have so much to say, but I know my boss is harassing me. I won't be able to present all that I have prepared, but I think I'll be able to pass across a message that our heritage language should not be relinquished, should not be exchanged, should not be shifted to any language in the world, simply because we want proof that we are educated. Education shouldn't be a course where we lose our history. Education should be a course where we trace our history and maintain our culture and tradition. We are religious people in Nigeria. Our religion is what? Is fostered and transmitted through our heritage languages, better than it is used in other languages. On behalf of my wife, my children, and my father and mother who are not here, they took their final breath 20 years ago. I want to thank God Almighty for the opportunity given to me. The journey to professorship to me is characterized by hurdles, rising and falling. Time will not permit me to go into details of what happened to me, but I can tell you that I'm a man with lonely background, but complex history. Where I came from and where I am today entails lots of challenges, but I'm happy. I've met people who have shaped my life. I want to thank the Vice Chancellor. I want to thank Prof Obama. I want to thank the university community. I want to thank all of you for listening to me. I'm sorry, I'm not have been communicating to you the way you expected. Like I said at the beginning of my no. So people feel that because you study English, you can speak English like the native speaker. I want to tell you that it's not possible. that God has endowed the native speaker with particular devices, mechanisms that only he can speak like the native. The vocal cords, organs of speech that I have is not the same thing with the American. You can see my lips. The size of my lips determines how I pronounce words. The position of my teeth. No, that's truth. I can write better than I talk. And the reason is that I'm not a good talker. Thank you for listening to me. God bless you.
Can we rise and give him a big applause, please? While Bruce was talking, I was busy trying to look for where Professor Manga is. Because I could recall that when he was giving his 7th inaugural lecture, Basani Bakai Zuma Neko Bakaiba. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I'm happy to introduce one of our own, somebody I'm proud of because he has helped in developing this university, Professor Saleh Abdu, Dean, Faculty of Humanities, Federal University, Kashir. Professor Saleh Abdu. Professor Saleh Abdu was at some point a dean of the postgraduate school of this university, and he brought in quite a number of programs, up to about 20 programs that is now being run in the School of Postgraduate School. I'm happy that after inaugural lectures, questions are never asked. If that is allowed and Professor Abdu is asked to call upon to comment, he will give another inaugural lecture. I'm happy that tradition, one Bankwami, that tradition is not there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to invite who will give vote of thanks on behalf of the university, and somebody I'm cheerful, proud of, the registrar of this university, Dr. Abubakar Aliyu Bafeto, to give a vote of thanks. Immediately after that, there will be national anthem, and the exit, leaving the hall, will be in reverse order, while the Vice Chancellor, after the maze, will be at the front, and all our persons, senators will follow, and the rest of us will also follow. Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I beg your indulgence to adapt your protocol in toto. Thank you very much, sir. As we come to the end of the 8th professorial inaugural lecture, it is my pleasure to convey our sincere appreciations, heartfelt, to the presenter, Professor Bulus Wire, for his insightful, illuminating, and quite educative lecture. We are most grateful for your presentation. It is also my honor to convey our sincere appreciations to our guests, invited guests, other distinguished academics for attending this event, leaving all your other engagements. I know particularly today has been a very hectic day for a lot of people, a series of meetings and so on, but you left all this to come and attend this inaugural lecture. The lecture should not have been, could not have been a success without your presence. We are most grateful for your presence. In particular, Professor Saleh Abdu has been mentioned, Professor Saleh Olapum from Federal University. It used to be Federal University Kashere, but I learned that it is now Federal University of Kashere. You are most welcome. Professor Kalae is our own, so it's not coming from somewhere. I also want to express or convey our appreciation to the Vice Chancellor, who I reliably learned that instituted the inaugural lecture series, and it has been up and running. This is the 8th one. I have said it before, it's very rare to have continuous series of inaugural lectures like this because of the financial layout, the commitment, and so on. GSU has been a success, and the chairman of the ceremonies committee, who was the chairman of the inaugural lecture series before and upgraded to ceremonies committee, I think with the addition of 12 new professors and more are coming, I think your job is becoming a full-time job. We may need to, the Vice Chancellor need to consider you for a full secretariat support staff so that the series will be running. The ceremonies committee has been wonderful, has been up and doing. It has never failed, and a lot of things are coming. We are most grateful for that. So on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and the entire University Management Committee, I thank everybody for making this event a success. Thank you very much.
The national anthem, please, will remain standing. And don't forget the procession is going in reverse order. The place bearer and followed by Vice Chancellor and Senate members. Thank you.
Wannan ina sayan shi a market. Dalilin da ya